I wanna surrender.
Hey, welcome to the Glen Gauer podcast, the best podcast you'll listen to all day. Sponsored by Mission Blueprint. So, Dennis, the Bible says, "Do not imagine that I have come to abolish the law and the prophets. I have come not to abolish, but to complete them." Now, Jesus,
what does that mean?
Yeah, to complete the law. So, of course, it's incomplete. The way they've been living in the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, is not the way God had it in the beginning. So we know...
You mean it got corrupted by man somewhere along the way?
A little bit. There's a
Yeah.
little bit of corruption here. And last week we talked about Matthew 19. How was it in the beginning? Male and female.
Male, female, yes.
So there's been some issues. Now, this goes back to certainly Adam and Eve, but one step forward, Cain. Cain killed his brother Abel. And then Adam and Eve had another son by the name of Seth. So in this whole world story, whether it's politics, culture, whatever you want to discuss, you have these two opposing lines, the Canaanite line, the Sethite line. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I've talked about this before, and I don't know, I love talking about these two lines because when you think about everything that's happening in the world today, all the evil, the form of that comes from the Canaanite line. And in the Old Testament, God told them in the beginning, God told the Sethite line. The Sethites were the good guys in the story, right? The Canaanites are the bad guys in the story. The Canaanites, they worshipped Satan, literally, right? Baal, that's right. So they worship Satan. They came up with the concept of cities so you can enslave people. They had many wives. They made musics. They were the inventors, right, of all this technology. Even today, all this technology we have comes from the line of Cain.
Yep.
It's so interesting. For some reason, I don't know why, but I just thought that Canaanite line disappeared at the time of Christ. Not true.
No.
Some people believe that some of the Pharisees were Rothschilds with a new name. The Rothschilds named themselves Rothschilds later on, but it comes from that whole line. So there's these two opposing lines, the Canaanite line and the Sethite line.
You know, God didn't do a very good job when he did the flood to get rid of all this evil.
He did indeed. I mean, some of the Canaanites made it out of the flood, according to Josephus.
Right.
So God told the Sethites, do not marry Canaanite women. Why?
You're perpetuating the evil line.
That's right. It's the embrace of evil and what comes with it. Now, you could say, well, Glenn, she's just the one for me. She's beautiful. She smells good. I mean, she's the one for me. I'm in love with her. She's going to bring evil upon your household. And that's what happened to the Sethite line. So they crossed a bridge they shouldn't have crossed. That's why we have the Noah story. It would be fun sometime to talk about the giants.
That would be.
Yes.
Best.
I would like to do a podcast.
And can we talk about Enoch too?
Oh, that would be so much fun. We will.
Okay. Deal.
So let's do a giants, Enoch, that whole thing.
Good. I'm
So
writing it down.
in the Old Testament, we had the Noah story where God used water to start over. Now, as a Christian, that should make you think of what?
Baptism.
Baptism, yeah. It's a prefigurement of baptism.
Washing away.
Washing away. The number one thing I think they struggled with in the Old Testament is... What is your guess?
What they struggled with?
Yeah, in the Old Testament. And there's a few answers.
Oh,
certainly.
man. So we're going through the action figure comic book type Old Testament Bible with my son right now. And
The Action Bible?
yes.
Oh, it's so good.
It is really, really good. And what I guess I'm seeing play out in there is a constant lack of faith in God. And this constantly being pulled back to Baal and the different deities and to the rulers being full of gluttony and pride that, no, I did this without God. So praise me, not God. And then you see the eventual crumbling of every civilization. And the Persians taking over the Babylon and Babylon taking over Jerusalem. Judah is just That's what I see.
You really hit on it well. I mean, there's nothing that I can say that is to trump you, because really it's the question of trust. Adam in the garden.
Oh, yeah.
Did he trust Yahweh or not? Right? He did not trust him in the end. He did it his way. So we do not trust God. The angle today, though, is trusting God in matrimony. Sexual immorality is all over the Old Covenant. Today there's lots of sex in movies, pornography, adult movies. That's just nothing new under the sun. All of that, except for having television, which maybe they did. Who knows? You don't know.
Right.
You don't know, but I suspect they didn't. But the sexual immorality is all over the Old Covenant. We talk about the great Samson and how great Samson was with his strength.
Oh, yeah.
Dude, he was a ladies' man.
And he was buff.
Well, he may have been, but he was a ladies' man, He had all the women he wanted. And we talk about the great King David and all the great things that King David did. Two things. One, bloodshed. Think how much blood was shed on his watch. Two, women. He was married to Saul's daughter.
Yep.
Wasn't good enough.
Nope.
He decided to take his buddy's wife.
After he had his buddy killed.
Yes. It's crazy. So all this sexual immorality is at the bedrock.
Luckily, we don't fight or struggle with any of that today.
We do not. We are more sophisticated because we're intellectual today.
That's right. We're smarter than that.
Now, some people believe that Adam and Eve's first sin may have been sexual. Now, hear me out. The apple could be a metaphor. Now, maybe, ladies and gentlemen, maybe it was an apple from the tree and they took it and ate it. That's good enough for me.
Right.
But what if it was the form of sexual impropriety? In other words, how do you recreate? How does God create? He creates human persons by using sex, the conjugal act.
Sure.
Man gives his entire self to the woman. The woman gives her entire self to her man. It's a full self-giving, and this mirrors the Trinity, right? When you think about the Trinity, there's a Father who has the Son. There's a Father who has a Son, and he gives his entire self to the Son. The Son receives entirely the Father, gives himself back to the Father, and the Father receives the Son, and this constant exchange of love is called the Holy Spirit.
Sure.
In matrimony, man loves his wife fully, and the product of that, right, as intended, is a human person.
Yes,
a third person.
Another third.
Yeah, another three. So if you want to screw up culture, you bring in sexual immorality. You don't complete the act. Now we see the first form of contraception with the sin of Onan. Onan was told to take his dead brother's wife and create a baby, and he refused to complete the act. Because of this, he was killed. God struck him down for that. So contraception, ladies and gentlemen, is nothing new. When we think of contraception, we think, oh yeah, they came up with a pill in 1960,
62.
62. They came up with this pill and now we can have contraception. Oh, no. Contraception is as old as the world is. If you want to go on a deep dive of contraception, go to the Old Testament, read history. Women would do crazy things not to get pregnant. They would. And some of it for, I think, reasonable reasons, because man does not know how to take care of women. Right. I mean, this is why we have the rise of feminism, because men, one of the reasons, I think there's other political reasons, actually, that we could talk about. Feminism is part of the communist playbook. We could talk about that another time, maybe. So we have this, man does not know how to love properly. So Jesus comes to upset the apple cart. When you take a look at the Roman Empire, arguably the greatest empire of all time. You know, maybe you could say the Greeks before them. They were huge with Alexander. But arguably the Roman Empire has made the biggest impact on the world. For example, roads.
Oh, yeah.
Why do we have roads the way we have roads?
Because of 2 horses' butts.
That's right. We have talked about this before.
We have.
Yeah, we have roads because of the Roman Empire.
Yep.
Oh, Glenn, they weren't all that sophisticated back then. Really? They had indoor plumbing.
Yep. They had in-room bath systems and bathhouses and a thriving tax culture. And I mean, there's a lot of things from their playbook we still use today.
Oh,
because
yeah.
it worked.
So the Romans are depicted as the standard, maybe the world standard of how politics should be run, or
A European standard.
a European standard.
I still don't think
Thank
you can
you.
trump the Asian monarch empire system that the Asians still use.
Okay, you're right about that. So I'm in the West. I'm thinking like the West still. You're right about that. How did the Romans look at family? See, this is the big question.
We touched a little bit on this last week.
Yes, we did. We're going to go a little deeper today. Now, do you remember the movie The Gladiator?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Russell Crowe.
Love that movie.
Oh, he's awesome.
I love that movie. What we do today echoes in eternity. That might be a paraphrase more than a quote, but it's close to that, right? In that movie, you see the main character played by Russell Crowe, the gladiator. He becomes the gladiator.
Yeah. After being a general.
He, in the beginning scene, he's walking in a wheat field and he's feeling the wheat on his hands.
Yep, he's walking to his villa. You can see his villa up in the distance, and his wife and his child are there.
Right. He's a farmer, and he has a wife and child. So we're made to believe, and maybe in this particular case, he loves one woman and has one child, and that's family. Mm-hmm. So if you watch that movie, The Gladiator, you would think that that's what family looked like in the Roman Empire.
Mm-hmm. Hollywood does a great job of telling us how it is.
Not so, my friend. Not so. First of all, women had zero rights. And this came from, this is also in the Jewish religion. Women had zero rights, right? They couldn't do anything without the men. Part of that, I believe, comes from the sin of Adam and Eve. Eve, particularly for talking to the serpent. I think that's part of it. And then right away, Cain in that line and Lamech, women were slaves to men. Men are stronger physically. And I think St. Peter speaks about men are the stronger, women are the weaker sex. I don't think he's talking about spiritually, just physically.
Right.
So it's a man's world.
Right.
There's no doubt about it. And our sin as men is we don't know how to love our women. So women have very little rights. When a woman was old enough, she could separate from her dad, but join another man. So when you look at the Roman household, the man, certainly at the top, there's no one equal to him.
Very similar to Emperor Caesar. There's no one equal to him.
Right. So maybe that's the model, huh? It could. I never thought about that. That might be the model. So there's no one. The man is king, and so he may have a wife or wives under him. They have no rights. Now, side note, you and I are married men.
Yes.
Can you imagine have more than one wife right now? Why are you laughing?
No.
One is enough.
One is enough for me.
This is not a negative thing.
No.
But I'm having a tough time keeping up with one woman.
Right.
Imagine two, and then the jealousy between the two fighting over me. It makes no sense to me.
I mean, it sounds very humbling and very, I don't know what the good word is that I'd have multiple women pining for my love and my affections and all of this goodness that our listeners can't see. I mean, it sounds really like, for my ego, sounds really good.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it certainly does.
From a management standpoint, no.
So if you're a Roman man, one woman as a wife, no, you could have more than one wife. You had concubines, you had slaves, you had workers. Let's say you had a vineyard.
You just take care of your needs anytime and anywhere you needed to.
That was your family. You were in charge of all of that.
You were a leader.
You were a leader. And it wasn't necessarily based in love. Rather, it was based in authority. I am the authority here. I am the ruler of this family. You will do what I say. It gets bad.
And that's still how it is today at the Gauer house, right?
That's right. I do whatever my wife tells me what to do. That's exactly how it is. It's a matriarchy here, not a patriarchy. How things change, right? Now, if you knew anything about my wife, you would laugh because you know that wouldn't be true. She is as obedient as anyone. Not that I call her to
But
obedience.
she has a great head on her shoulders and a great counsel.
She keeps me in line.
Yes.
There's no doubt about
Well,
it.
a good woman should.
In the Old Testament, we had this same concept of many wives and concubines, like we said earlier in the Canaanite line. This isn't anything new, but I think the Romans did a very good job of ordering it. This is how it's going to be. Now, maybe that was true in Judaism, but there was a conflict in the Sethite line. You can see hints of God saying no to polygamy, no to concubines. And I think you see this really clearly with Jacob. Jacob was after one woman, and he wanted that woman so bad he would marry her older sister just to get to her. And who did Jacob love the most? The fruit of that woman. What was Jacob's wife's name again?
Oh my goodness!
I want to say Rebecca, but it's not Rebecca. It's
no, because I remember this story because he got so mad at his father-in-law.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, so you see that in Jacob because he has a favorite son, Joseph, that he made with Rachel. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a little brain fog still. Rachel. So you see hints of monogamy, and God speaks about monogamy because the whole Old Testament is about God is the bridegroom, and we are his bride, and we are supposed to be faithful to the one bridegroom, and we keep cheating on him with gods over and over and over and over again. And we have different gods. Baal's a big one, Baphomet, and had all these other gods that...
Well, it depends where you are in the world. If you're Nordic, you've got Odin, father to Thor, and Loki, and all of the Norse.
Wait a minute, isn't
gods.
Loki in the Guardians of the Galaxy?
He is, but so is Thor.
So is Thor. It's all recycled again.
It is. It's all the Greek and... I mean, depending which part of the world you come from, because even like the Hindu religion has multiple gods. The Egyptians has Ra, they have a ball. They have a whole bunch of different. They have.
I need a laugh track there. Did you do that on purpose?
No.
Oh, come on.
No, but they have all of their multiple deities. You see it in the northern Norse country. You see it in Asian culture. It was kind of just a general world belief. I mean, even Native Americans had their different sun gods and their night gods and their spiritual gods. It's a world and a cultural thing that multiple gods did multiple things for you. Harvest, fertility, wine, sun, moon, stars. There was a search for explaining all these natural phenomena.
So why are we talking about these gods? We're talking about these gods because these gods dictate the most important institution, marriage. Marriage is the most important institution on earth. It's huge. And if we can't get matrimony right, then our culture's over. And at the core of marriage is sexuality, right?
You have no culture without family. If you don't have a common belief system, you don't have a common structure, you don't have a common core of what our goal or objective or port is, you're adrift at sea with no destination.
Wow, amen. That is so true. So family is at the core. If you want a healthy culture, society, you need a healthy family. So these gods, particularly Baal and Baphomet, Baphomet is the transgender god. You know, he has a face that's a goat.
A goat and both male and female genitalia.
Right. So, and that's what's happening in our culture today. That's why we see this, not only homosexual movement, but this transgender movement, this confusion of the genders.
The binary.
Right. So that's why sex could have been the first sin. Now, maybe the apple led to the sexual impropriety with Adam and Eve. Could have been that way too. I'm not so sure. There's lots of room for conjecture here. So depending on who you worship leads to what kind of family you have.
Of course.
If you don't worship Yahweh, Jesus Christ, your idea of family is most likely going to be pagan.
Of course. Or agnostic. So if you look around your house, if you do a true inventory of your conscience, your soul, your mind thoughts for a week, you'll figure out what you worship. My wife and I've had this discussion multiple times because I go to work 40, 50 hours a week being self-employed. 168 hours in the week. If we sleep, 7, 8 hours a night on a good night, maybe in the house under the same roof, that's another 58 hours, maybe 55 hours a week that we're there. So that's 100 hours a week between work and sleep. That gives us 68 hours a week. What are we doing with that time? Where are you spending it? And I mean, the nice thing about our technology now is we can actually track that with what websites do we go to? What Snapchats are we on? What are we looking at on our Instagram? What are we looking at on our TikToks? Because the history of what we watch becomes what feeds into our reels, what's feeding our brain, because these technology companies have all the points figured out. They're feeding your own ego. They're feeding your own inner interests, even subconsciously, that you don't even know. And what path are they leading you down? I'm a conservative, so I see a lot of conservative videos. I see a lot of conservative news snippets on my reels. I don't see much about some of the other crazy stuff happening in the world because it isn't something I put time, energy, or effort into. But do a personal inventory. You'll figure out which gods you're worshiping, who's the master of your house.
Well, in America, I think it's entertainment.
Oh, for men? Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, in the movie The Gladiator, again, I'm going back to it. The second time I think he's in the Gladiator games, he just kills a bunch of people, kills a bunch of men.
Yeah, when he's still out in the rural games before the emperor has set up the big Colosseum.
And then he says, "Are you not entertained?
Isn't that why you came?"
Mm-hmm. Yeah, entertainment is, it's really death to America.
It is, but think about how many millions of dollars are in technology for entertainment. How often do you see a parent just hand their cell phone off to their child to let them watch some little Disney movie or a little clip it on YouTube, or now with all the apps you can let them watch something really quick on Disney Plus or on Hulu, and they can just be entertained. Like, we're teaching our children that the value of time together is to be entertained, not to be together. And I'll be honest, I have gone up to families at nights out with my wife for dinner or for supper or watch with my kids, and I will point out how much I disagree with that behavior so that my children know that isn't something they can ever expect from me, and that is something I'd never expect them to do with their children. And I will go over to the table and I will tell a parent that's really, if they have behavioral issues at home, this is why. You're letting somebody else lead your family. You're letting a piece of technology dictate what should happen at this table.
So let me ask you a political question.
It's dangerous.
The fall of the Roman Empire. What caused the fall of the Roman Empire?
If you go into this, I really believe that it's the fall and the breakdown of the belief in the value of what the Roman Empire stood for, what their values were. If you go back to Romulus and Remus and why they even created Rome where they did, how they did it, and bringing the 5 clans together to establish what is then known as the Roman Empire, and those base values. And I mean, it was very simple laws. It was very simple existence. I mean, it was known throughout the Roman Empire. You don't mess with somebody who's from the Roman Empire because they'll send a legion out and they'll destroy you, your village, your family, and you will never have an existence on this planet again, because it was all for the family. It was for the Roman family. And then you see that break down, and it gets real messy, real fast. And then the political structure breaks down, the architecture and everything that they stood for just erodes.
From a spiritual angle, which isn't just spiritual, or a theological angle, the two things that caused Rome to fall, in my view, contraception and abortion. That's how I look at it. I mean, at the heart of it, it was all over the Roman family. The wives were contracepting, and then, they were aborting babies. I mean, if you have if you have a baby out of the womb for 2 days or a day, and you bring it to the head of the household, and he says, kill that baby, I don't want it. And he can determine whether that baby lives by just looking at that innocent face, you have a huge problem. And over time, that's going to be a certain breakdown. Let me ask you this, is there an institution that has lasted as long as the Catholic Church or Christianity? But I mean, you're not a Catholic, but is there an institution that's lasted longer than that?
Not that I know of.
So there's something about Christianity that has affected the world. What parallels do you see from the Roman Empire to today's world?
Well, like you said when we started this podcast, that there's so much from the Roman Empire infrastructure, laws, roads, societal functions that have played from then to now. Now we see the doctors playing that role of head of the household or head of the family, whether this child lives or this child dies. And I mean, even for where our family had an option, we had a trisomy 13 baby. Once the health system figured out that our baby was never going to be viable, their outright recommendation was to go out of state and have him aborted, so Trista didn't suffer. And that wasn't our belief system, because God works miracles every day, and who are we to say whether this is God's perfect child or not? And he got to go to heaven at 23 weeks, but my wife enjoyed his presence in her and nurturing him from her abilities all the way up to that time. But even before, 10 weeks before that, they wanted to end the life.
See, oftentimes we don't think about the psychological ramifications for our women.
Right.
And we're not taking care of our women. And when women abort, within 10 years, they have depression. And so many of those women want to kill themselves because they know they killed their baby.
Right.
No matter what science says, it's just a bunch of cells or whatever.
And I'll be honest, the doctor side of me, when I found out that my wife was carrying a baby that wasn't going to be viable, I was absolutely like, yeah, honey, we got to do this for you. Like we should. And her faith and where she believes gave me faith that she was okay to carry it. And I was still humbled to that today, that she had greater faith than I did, because I was thinking with a scientific and educated mind of man's understanding, not God's, at that time, that her belief, her strength was stronger than mine. And that's still really humbling to say today.
We had a similar situation. At 20 weeks, we found out that our baby didn't have kidneys. And they call that Potter's syndrome. And the doctor recommended an abortion. Well, if you know anything about my wife, that was never going to happen. Nor was it going to ever happen with me. But as the man, I'm really sensitive. And even if she said, have an abortion, we're going to do this, I would have said, no, we're not going to. But there's no way she was going to do that. So she carried our baby to 37 weeks. And the last 3 days were excruciating with pain because the umbilical cord was wrapped around our baby Joseph 4 or 5 times, and there was no amniotic fluid, and she couldn't sleep. But she still wasn't ready to deliver Joseph because he was alive in her, and that was a precious time she had. So after, of course, we delivered, he died about 3 hours later. This is unheard of in today's culture.
Right. And this is where you talk about what brings past to present. That's where I see the decision making is still there. It just isn't you and me as the head of our household. We've transferred that power to somebody in a white coat. We've transferred that to somebody in a lab somewhere.
So I see the parallels the same. What I see took Rome down, and I think you're right with everything you're saying, but is abortion and contraception. What's going to take the West down is the same thing. Abortion and contraception. We have another major problem today. What's really interesting, though, is at the time, the peak of the Roman Empire, with all the abortion and contraception, but particularly abortion or killing of babies, Jesus came. He came to set the record straight about salvation and about family life. What's also interesting is that we're having huge issues with contraception and abortion today. 89% of Catholic women,
90% of Protestant women
on the pill.
Yeah, using some sort of contraception.
And you know what? As a man who is married to someone who's not on the pill, we don't use any of that stuff, any contraception. You can tell when families are using the pill or contracepting in any form. You can tell. It's very, very interesting. 18 years ago, I took a class on marriage and contraception and natural family planning. And they told us that. You can tell families that are contracepting. There is not a closeness and intimacy about those families. And I thought, hogwash. Well, then I started paying attention. Yeah, you can tell if you're contracepting because there is no full self-giving between man and woman. There's a blockage.
So Glenn, let me ask you this question. If we're seeing and we're looking at the parallels of how the Roman Empire has come full circle, let's call it full circle from its history and how the roads have still played into our future of how we're going to design roads and cars for the next 100 years. And we're looking at this now even from that perspective of family and knowing that during the Roman Empire time, there was this contraceptive, there was this decision making that was of whose life is valuable and not. And Jesus comes and he disrupts this whole belief system. He calls into question the practices of a millennia. How does that play into where we're at today as a culture and a society, both whether Catholic in the Catholic Church or as a modern family in the Protestant Church? Where do you see Jesus playing into this today?
With the Romans, with the Greeks, and on, their big struggle was who they worshipped. 90% of the world worships something. I'm not sure if that's...
I'd like to worship me.
Right. I know you do. So when you don't have worship in its proper place, you bring in chaos. 25% of Catholics in America go to Mass. That is decreasing. In Europe, it's much, much less. 5%. And what you're seeing is with the rise of contraception, countries cannot maintain population. I studied this in 1995. In Germany, we talked about Germany in 1995. They can't replace themselves because they're not having enough children. And the Muslim religion is going to take over Germany. I'm not sure how that's playing out today, but we talked about that years ago. And in Europe, it's the same way. All the countries in Europe, with a couple of exceptions, will follow that. Poland might be one exception. So the first thing I would say is who you worship is key. If you're going to worship Baal, you're bringing that chaos into your life. So it all goes back to the person of Jesus Christ. Now, how do we evangelize? How do we touch those people who don't know him, who don't have him? One way is letting the beauty of family shine. So as husband, my first job is to pray, get my spiritual life in order. My wife too, to pray. But it's more important for me to pray than her, right? I'm the spiritual leader of the family, which we're going to talk about next week. what it really looks like. So we have to have our spirituality down. And then the second part is our morality. What does that look like? You know, when we talk about Catholic and Protestantism, there's a lot of things we agree on, but there's some things we do not agree on. And one is contraception. And there was no Protestant religion before 1930 that embraced contraception. 1930 or 1933 was the first opening of the window to contraception. And look what's happened. I mean, they really opened the doors in the Anglican Church to contraception, which touched every denomination. And it was so bad where the Catholic Church had to come out with two teachings, 1933, 1969, to defeat this. If we separate ourselves from Christ, we bring chaos and immorality into the culture.
Dare you say divorce yourself from Christ? I mean, look at that parallel into our modern culture of the lack of intimacy, the lack of connection, the lack of truly giving thyself to the other. Isn't that the first step of a divorce?
It's always about divorce. Adam and Eve divorced their relationship from God.
Of course.
Right. The old covenant is all about God reestablishing his relationship with them, and then they divorced him again. They kept divorcing him over and over. They kept worshiping these other gods. You get this story of Moses. God saves the people. I mean, how many miracles do they need? They got 10 miracles, then passing through the sea, and then manna falling from heaven, and then quail. And Moses gets the 10 commandments, and they
still want to go back.
They build a god out of gold.
Yeah.
See, it was embedded in them, and that's why they needed so much time to get rid of it out of their system. So divorce, it's all about marriage and divorce. This whole thing, it's about proper marriage, proper divorce. In the Catholic Church, there is no divorce because it's kind of like baptism. When you get baptized, you can't unbaptize yourself.
Right.
It's permanent. It's a sacrament. In the Catholic Church, it's the same way. If God really brought you two together and you were you were free to say yes, and you had enough knowledge, this is what you wanted to do, it's an unchangeable situation other than death.
And you look at that today with young people having sex outside of their marriage, starting families before they're committed to each other, and how that is a divorce of God's order, God's plan, God's design, and all the challenges that fall through the society, the chaos that we invite because we think a contraception will protect us.
It makes it all worse. What's your takeaway?
You know, my takeaway from this, this is such a big topic and such a personal one to each Protestant and Catholic that listens, that, again, as always, find good people around you, find good mentors, find good people in your church or in your neighborhood that you see being a good model of a good family, and have some honest discussions about where you're at with your life. And you might be surprised how many of your friends and neighbors are struggling with this same concept of contraception, but there are great options out there like natural family planning and great apps out there that help you both conversely help you conceive or can help you minimize that chance of having children when you don't want them to, without having to truly block out God or Jesus in the process.
Awesome. My takeaway is this. Everybody wants to be happy. And the biggest decision that you're going to make in life is your vocation. And for the Protestants, that's matrimony, marriage. In the Catholic world, we divide that up between two possibilities. Men can become priests, and they're celibate priests, and matrimony. So there's another option for the Catholic world. But we all, in the end, want to be happy. The biggest decision you're going to make, most of us are going to make, is which person are we going to marry? And if you live a life of drunkenness or sexual immorality or go down the line of immorality, that may determine what kind of male or female, right? That would determine what kind of woman I would choose. So be careful how you live your life. And the Christian marriage, I think, has a strong track record. If you want a successful marriage, I see no stronger marriages than Christian marriages.
Amen.
Anything else?
That's it.
All right. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen, for listening. We will see you next week, and may God strengthen
The bars of your gates.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Glen Gauer podcast, sponsored by Mission Blueprint. Mission Blueprint is a nonprofit ministry started by Glen and Jamie to sanctify the family. Our income is donation-based, and we need your help. Please support us financially by going to www.mission-blueprint.org and be a part of our financial team. Thank you, and may God strengthen the bars of your gate.